Tell me in the comments. Have you ever been completely alone during the holidays while everyone else seemed to have somewhere magical to go? Because what happened to Olivia Chun on December 23rd will change everything you think about Christmas miracles and the power of unexpected connections. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the empty office building, casting harsh shadows across Olivia's desk as she typed the final quarterly report. December 23rd, 9:47 p.m. Everyone else had left hours ago, rushing home to family dinners and holiday preparations, leaving behind only the lingering scent of someone's forgotten coffee and the faint echo of her keyboard clicks. She pushed a strand of dark hair behind her ear and glanced at her phone. No messages, no missed calls, nothing but the time glowing back at her. A stark reminder that while others were wrapping presents or baking cookies with loved ones, she was here, alone, again. The elevator dinged softly down the hall, and Olivia's fingers paused mid-sentence. Who else would be here this late on Christmas Eve? She listened to the footsteps approaching, recognizing the confident stride even before Matteo Santangelo appeared in her peripheral vision. Her boss looked impeccable as always, his charcoal suit perfectly tailored despite the late hour, dark hair styled with casual precision. At 34, Matteo commanded attention wherever he went, though Olivia had learned to keep her observations professional. He was brilliant, demanding, and completely out of her league in every conceivable way. "What are you still doing here?" he asked, stopping beside her desk with that slight frown he got when something disrupted his expectations. Finishing the Patterson report, Olivia replied without looking up, though her heart rate inexplicably quickened. She had worked for Matteo for 2 years, managing his schedule and handling the countless details that kept his import business running smoothly. She knew he took his coffee black, preferred his meetings brief, and never, ever discussed personal matters at work. The Patterson report was due next week, he said, his voice carrying that note of curiosity that meant he was actually paying attention instead of just checking on late office lights. "I know, but I figured I might as well finish it since I have nowhere else to be." The words slipped out before she could stop them, honest and slightly pathetic. Olivia immediately regretted the admission, focusing intently on her computer screen as heat crept up her neck. Matteo Santangelo did not need to know about her complete lack of holiday plans or the fact that she had been dreading the next 4 days of enforced solitude. "Nowhere else to be," he repeated slowly. On Christmas Eve, Olivia finally looked up, meeting his dark brown eyes with what she hoped was professional composure. "My family is in California. I usually just work through the holidays." That was a massive understatement. Her family was in California, true, but they were also completely uninterested in maintaining contact with the daughter who had chosen a business degree over the medical career they had planned for her. 3 years of holiday silence had taught Olivia that some bridges, once burned, stayed that way. Matteo studied her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. She had always prided herself on being invisible in the best possible way, efficient and unobtrusive, someone who solved problems without creating drama. Being the focus of his attention felt dangerous, like standing too close to a fire. "I have a proposition for you," he said finally, settling into the chair across from her desk with the fluid grace that characterized everything he did. Olivia saved her document and turned to face him properly, noting the way his jaw tensed slightly. In 2 years, she had never seen Matteo Santangelo anything less than completely confident. Whatever he was about to propose was making him nervous, which immediately put her on high alert. "My family has this Christmas Eve tradition," he began, his fingers drumming once against the chair arm before he stilled them. "Big dinner, lots of relatives, very Italian, very loud. And they have been asking about my personal life with increasing frequency and decreasing subtlety." Olivia nodded, unsure where this was heading, but recognizing the careful way he was choosing his words. Matteo never spoke without purpose, and he certainly never shared personal information casually. They seemed to believe that a successful 34-year-old man should have someone special in his life, he continued, and they have made it their mission to remedy what they see as my tragic single status. The words hung between them in the quiet office, and Olivia felt her pulse accelerate as she began to understand what he might be asking. Surely not. Surely Matteo Santangelo was not about to ask his assistant to pretend to be his girlfriend at a family Christmas dinner. "I need someone to accompany me tomorrow evening," he said, confirming her suspicion with characteristic directness. Someone who can convince my family that their concerns are unnecessary. Someone professional who understands that this would be a business arrangement with clear boundaries. Olivia stared at him, her mind racing through a dozen responses and rejecting them all. This was insane. This was inappropriate. This was also the most interesting thing that had happened to her in months. You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend? She said carefully, making sure she understood correctly. I want you to accompany me to a family dinner as my guest, Mateo corrected. What my family chooses to assume about our relationship is their business. The distinction felt important to him, though Olivia suspected it was a difference without much practical meaning. If she showed up to his family Christmas as his date, they were going to assume she was his girlfriend regardless of the technical terminology. Why me? She asked, genuinely curious. Mateo could have anyone. He was wealthy, successful, and devastatingly handsome in that effortless Italian way that made women stop and stare when he walked through the office lobby. Because you are professional, reliable, and already familiar with my schedule and preferences, he replied. Because I trust you to handle an unusual situation with discretion. And because you clearly have no other plans. The last reason stung a little, though it was perfectly accurate. Olivia tried to imagine herself at an elegant family dinner, making conversation with people who belonged to Mateo's sophisticated world. The idea terrified and intrigued her in equal measure. What exactly would this arrangement entail? She asked. One evening, dinner with my family at their home in Westchester. You would need to dress appropriately, which I would handle. We would arrive together, spend 3 to 4 hours socializing, and leave together. Professional behavior throughout, with enough familiarity to be believable. And in exchange? Mateo named a figure that made Olivia's eyes widen. It was more than she made in 2 months, enough to finally pay off her student loans and maybe even take a real vacation somewhere warm. I understand this is unusual, he said, seeming to interpret her silence as reluctance. If you are not comfortable with the arrangement, we can pretend this conversation never happened. But that was the thing. Olivia was not uncomfortable with the arrangement. She was terrified of it, certainly, and completely out of her depth. But uncomfortable? No. If anything, she was intrigued by the possibility of spending an evening in Mateo's world, seeing the man behind the perfectly professional exterior. She thought about her empty apartment, about the frozen dinner she had planned for Christmas Eve, about the romance novels she would probably read while pretending she did not mind being alone. Then she thought about the way Mateo had said his family was loud and Italian and warm, the way his voice had softened slightly when he mentioned their concern for his happiness. How dressy is this dinner? She asked. Relief flickered across his features so quickly she almost missed it. Very. I will arrange for appropriate clothing and accessories. Consider it part of the business expense. And we maintain professional boundaries throughout? Absolutely, he said firmly. This is a favor, Olivia. Nothing more. She nodded, though something in his tone suggested he was reminding himself as much as reassuring her. Fine. I accept your proposition. Excellent, Mateo said, standing with obvious relief. I will pick you up at 5:30 tomorrow evening. Wear something comfortable for now. We will handle the rest. After he left, Olivia sat in the empty office wondering what she had just agreed to. 24 hours from now, she would be sitting at a family dinner pretending to be involved with her boss, the man she had been quietly, hopelessly attracted to for 2 years. She finished the Patterson report in a daze, her mind spinning with questions about what tomorrow would bring. As she finally shut down her computer and gathered her things, one thought kept returning. For the first time in years, she would not be spending Christmas Eve alone. Walking to her car through the nearly empty parking garage, Olivia tried to convince herself this was just business, just a simple favor between colleagues. But deep down, she knew that nothing about tomorrow evening would be simple, and by the time it was over, the careful professional distance she had maintained with Matteo Santangelo would be impossible to rebuild. The next morning arrived gray and cold, snow threatening in the heavy December clouds that hung over Manhattan. Olivia stood outside Bergdorf Goodman at exactly 10 a.m., clutching her coffee and feeling completely out of place among the elegant shoppers gliding through the revolving doors like they belonged in this world of luxury and excess. When Matteo appeared beside her, she nearly jumped. He moved with that unsettling quiet confidence, appearing suddenly without her noticing his approach. Today he wore dark jeans and a charcoal wool coat that probably cost more than her monthly rent, looking effortlessly sophisticated in the way that some people seemed born to achieve. "Ready for this?" he asked, though his tone suggested it was more statement than question. Olivia nodded, not trusting her voice to sound steady. She had spent most of the previous night alternating between excitement and terror, wondering what she had gotten herself into and whether she would embarrass them both spectacularly. The store felt like entering another universe. Everything gleamed under soft lighting, from the marble floors to the crystal displays, and even the air seemed different here, perfumed and rarefied. Olivia found herself walking more carefully, as if her presence might somehow contaminate the pristine environment. Matteo moved through the store with obvious familiarity, nodding to sales associates who clearly recognized him. Within minutes, they were surrounded by three impeccably dressed women who treated him like visiting royalty and regarded Olivia with polite curiosity. "Ms. Chun needs something appropriate for a formal family dinner," Matteo explained to the lead saleswoman, a tall blonde with sharp cheekbones and an expensive smile. "Something elegant but not flashy. Classic." The woman, whose name tag read Helena, studied Olivia with the assessing gaze of someone trained to transform ordinary people into magazine-worthy versions of themselves. "Of course, Mr. Santangelo. What size are we working with?" The next hour passed in a blur of fabrics and fittings. Olivia found herself standing in luxurious dressing rooms, staring at price tags that made her stomach clench while Helena and her assistants debated the merits of various designer pieces. Everything was beautiful and completely foreign to her world of department store clearance racks and online discount codes. "This would be perfect," Helena announced, holding up a midnight blue dress that looked deceptively simple until Olivia noticed the way it caught the light. "The color will bring out her eyes beautifully." Matteo appeared in the seating area outside the dressing rooms, settling into one of the leather chairs with the easy grace of someone completely comfortable in luxury environments. When Olivia emerged wearing the dress, his expression shifted in a way that made her pulse accelerate. The dress fit perfectly, skimming her curves without being obvious about it, the deep blue fabric making her skin glow and her dark hair look richer. Helena had added delicate jewelry and heels that somehow made Olivia feel both elegant and terrified. "Beautiful," Matteo said quietly, his voice carrying a note she had never heard before. His dark eyes traveled over her slowly, as if seeing her for the first time. "That will work perfectly." Something in his tone made Olivia's cheeks warm. She had worked for him for 2 years, sitting outside his office every day, and he had never looked at her the way he was looking at her now. It was unsettling and thrilling in equal measure. After the clothing came the salon appointment. Helena had insisted that the look needed to be complete, and Matteo had agreed without hesitation. Olivia found herself in a chair at an exclusive spa, watching her reflection change as skilled professionals worked on her hair and makeup. They kept her natural coloring but enhanced everything, darkening her lashes until her eyes looked enormous, adding subtle highlights to her hair that made it gleam under the lights. When they finally turned her around to see the finished result, Olivia barely recognized herself. The woman in the mirror was sophisticated and polished, the kind of person who might actually belong in Matteo Santangelo's world. Her hair fell in soft waves past her shoulders, and the makeup made her look like she had always been beautiful instead of merely acceptable. When she emerged from the salon, Matteo was waiting by his car, scrolling through his phone. He looked up as she approached and went completely still, his expression unreadable. Olivia felt suddenly self-conscious, aware of how different she must look. "Is it too much?" she asked, reaching up to touch her hair nervously. "No," he said after a moment that stretched too long. "It is perfect. You look perfect." The word hung between them, weighted with something that felt distinctly unprofessional. Olivia climbed into his car, hyper-aware of the way the dress moved around her legs and the unfamiliar weight of the jewelry at her throat. As they drove through Manhattan traffic, Matteo glanced at her frequently, as if trying to reconcile this version of her with the efficient assistant he had known for 2 years. The silence felt charged, different from their usual comfortable professional quiet. "We should probably discuss our story," he said finally, his voice more formal than it had been all day. My family will expect to know how we met, how long we have been together, that sort of thing. Olivia nodded, grateful for the return to practical matters. How long have we supposedly been dating? 3 months, he decided. Long enough to be serious, but not so long that they would expect major relationship milestones. We met through work, but kept it private initially. Makes sense. What do they know about my background? He was quiet for a moment. What is your background, Olivia? I mean beyond what is in your personnel file. The question surprised her with its personal nature. She realized that despite working closely together for 2 years, they had never talked about anything truly personal. Their conversation stayed firmly within professional boundaries, efficient and safe. I grew up in San Francisco, she said slowly. My parents are both doctors. They wanted me to follow the same path, but I discovered I preferred business. We do not really talk anymore. That must be difficult, Mateo said, and something in his tone suggested genuine sympathy rather than polite small talk. What about your family? She asked. What should I expect tonight? They are loud, he said with the first real smile she had seen all day. My mother will probably try to feed you until you cannot move, and my father will want to know everything about your intentions toward his son. My sisters will interrogate you about your life story, and my brother will make inappropriate jokes until someone stops him. The warmth in his voice when he talked about them was obvious. Despite his success and sophistication, Mateo clearly adored his family. It made him seem more human somehow, less like the intimidating boss and more like someone who might actually need her help navigating familial expectations. They sound wonderful, Olivia said honestly. They are, he agreed. They are also relentless when they decide they like someone. Fair warning. As they pulled up to her apartment building so she could change into the new dress, Mateo turned to look at her directly. This arrangement, he said carefully. It stays professional, right? We both understand what this is. Of course, Olivia replied quickly, though something in his tone suggested he was reminding himself as much as asking her. Just business. But even as she said the words, she could not ignore the way her heart had started racing when he called her perfect, or the way his eyes had lingered on her transformation. Whatever was happening between them felt like anything but business, and they both knew it. Walking toward her building, Olivia caught her reflection in the glass doors and barely recognized the woman staring back. In a few hours, she would be sitting at Matteo Santangelo's family table, pretending to be someone important to him. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt beautiful. The Santangelo family estate in Westchester was nothing like Olivia had imagined. Instead of intimidating grandeur, she found herself looking at a sprawling stone house that radiated warmth despite its impressive size. Every window glowed with golden light, and elaborate Christmas decorations transformed the property into something from a holiday movie. Garland draped the wraparound porch, white lights outlined every roofline, and a massive wreath hung on the front door like a welcoming embrace. Nervous, Mateo asked as they sat in his car for a moment, engine still running. Terrified, Olivia admitted, smoothing the midnight blue dress one more time. What if they do not like me? What if they see right through this arrangement? They will love you, he said with surprising confidence, reaching over to squeeze her hand briefly. Just be yourself, Olivia. That is more than enough. The simple contact sent electricity up her arm, and she tried to ignore how natural his touch felt. This was supposed to be professional, she reminded herself. Just a favor between colleagues. The front door opened before they even reached it, revealing a petite woman with silver-streaked dark hair and Mateo's warm brown eyes. She wore an elegant burgundy dress and an enormous smile that immediately put Olivia at ease. Tesoro, she exclaimed, pulling Mateo into a fierce hug before turning expectant eyes to Olivia. And you must be the girl who has finally captured my impossible son's attention. Mama, this is Olivia Chun, Mateo said, his hand settling naturally at the small of Olivia's back. Olivia, my mother, Isabella Santangelo. Before Olivia could respond, she found herself enveloped in Isabella's embrace, the kind of warm, genuine hug she had not experienced since childhood. The older woman smelled like expensive perfume and something that might have been cinnamon, and her hug felt like coming home. Welcome to our family, cara mia, Isabella whispered, and something in her tone suggested she meant it completely. Inside, the house buzzed with activity and conversation. The interior was elegant but lived in, decorated for Christmas with an abundance that spoke of tradition and joy rather than mere expense. A massive tree dominated the living room, surrounded by carefully wrapped presents, and the smell of incredible food filled the air. Olivia barely had time to process her surroundings before she was swept into a whirlwind of introductions. Mateo's father, Vincent, was a distinguished man in his early 60s who possessed his son's quiet authority, but with an added warmth that came from years of happiness. His sisters, Lucia and Francesca, were both beautiful and vivacious, immediately peppering Olivia with questions about her work and background with the enthusiasm of people who genuinely wanted to know her. His younger brother Marco appeared with a glass of wine for each of them and a mischievous grin that suggested trouble. "So you are the woman brave enough to date our Mateo," he said with obvious affection. "We were beginning to think he was married to his business." "Marco," Mateo warned, but there was fondness in his voice rather than real annoyance. "What? I'm just saying it is nice to see him with someone who makes him smile," Marco replied innocently. "When was the last time we saw him smile like this?" Olivia felt heat creep up her neck as she realized Mateo was indeed smiling, his usual serious expression replaced by something lighter and more relaxed than she had ever seen in the office. Being here with his family transformed him into someone warmer, more approachable. Dinner was an elaborate affair that began with antipasti and seemed designed to last for hours. The dining room table could easily seat 12, and every place was set with fine china and crystal that caught the light from the chandelier overhead. Isabella had clearly spared no effort to make Christmas Eve dinner special. As they took their seats, Olivia found herself positioned between Mateo and Francesca, with the whole family arranged around the table in a way that encouraged conversation and connection. The first course arrived within minutes, and Isabella began the kind of storytelling that seemed central to their family dynamic. She told them about Christmas Eves from Mateo's childhood, about traditions passed down from her own mother and grandmother, about the importance of family and food and celebration. Her voice carried the lilting accent that Mateo had mostly lost, and her stories painted pictures of a loving, chaotic household where children were cherished and every meal was an event. "Tell us about your family traditions, Olivia," Vincent said kindly as they moved through the multiple courses. "What did Christmas look like when you were growing up?" The question caught Olivia off guard, even though she should have expected it. She felt Mateo's attention focus on her, along with the warm, interested gazes of his entire family. These people clearly valued family above everything else, and she was about to explain that her own family had essentially disowned her for choosing the wrong career path. "We were always very focused on achievement," she said carefully. "My parents are both doctors, very dedicated to their work. Our celebrations were usually quite small and formal." It was the truth, though heavily edited. She did not mention that her parents had viewed any celebration as time wasted that could have been spent studying or working. She did not explain that Christmas dinner had been a quiet, tense affair where conversations centered on her grades and future prospects rather than joy or connection. "But what about the fun parts?" Lucia pressed with genuine curiosity. "The cookies, the decorations, staying up late on Christmas Eve? Did you have any special traditions that were just yours?" Olivia hesitated, aware that her carefully prepared backstory had not included details about childhood Christmas traditions because she had never really had any. The silence stretched long enough to become noticeable, and she felt panic begin to rise in her chest. "Olivia's family was very different from ours," Mateo said smoothly, his hand finding hers under the table and squeezing gently. "She has been teaching me that there are many ways to celebrate, right, Cara?" The endearment rolled off his tongue naturally, and his touch grounded her enough to nod and smile. "Yes," she managed. "Your family traditions are wonderful, though. The way you all cook together and tell stories, it is very special." Isabella beamed at her across the table. "Family is everything," she said simply. "Blood or chosen, it does not matter. What matters is that we take care of each other and celebrate the good moments together." Something in her tone suggested she understood more about Olivia's situation than had been explicitly stated. The older woman's eyes were kind but knowing, and Olivia felt seen in a way that was both comforting and slightly overwhelming. As the evening progressed, the conversation flowed around topics both serious and silly. They discussed Mateo's business, Francesca's new job as a teacher, Marco's latest romantic disaster, and Lucia's plans for her upcoming wedding. They included Olivia naturally in every discussion, asking her opinion and listening to her responses with genuine interest. When Isabella brought out her famous tiramisu for dessert, she placed an extra-large portion in front of Olivia with a conspiratorial wink. "You are too skinny, Cara," she announced. "We need to fix this immediately." The gesture was so motherly, so caring, that Olivia felt tears threaten behind her eyes. When was the last time someone had worried about whether she was eating enough? When had anyone last treated her like family? After dinner, they moved to the living room where a fire crackled in the massive stone fireplace. The adults settled with coffee and liqueurs while soft Christmas music played in the background. The conversation became more intimate, with stories about childhood memories and family jokes that spoke of decades of shared history. Matteo sat beside Olivia on the sofa, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body and catch the subtle scent of his cologne. When his father started telling embarrassing stories about Matteo's teenage years, he groaned and dropped his head to her shoulder in mock despair. The gesture was clearly performed for his family's benefit, but it felt genuine nonetheless. Olivia found herself reaching up to smooth his hair automatically, a gesture of comfort that came naturally despite their supposed professional boundaries. "Look at them," Lucia said softly to her mother. "They are sweet together." Isabella nodded approvingly. "It is good to see him happy," she said. "We were beginning to worry he would never find someone who understood him." The words hung in the air, weighted with meaning that made Olivia's chest tighten. These people genuinely cared about Matteo's happiness, and they were clearly thrilled to think he had found love. The knowledge that their entire relationship was a performance felt increasingly wrong. When the evening finally began to wind down, family members started making their departure preparations with promises to return the next day for Christmas dinner. As Olivia helped Isabella carry dishes to the kitchen, the older woman caught her arm gently. "I want you to know," she said quietly, "that you are welcome here anytime. Family dinner every Sunday, holidays, or just because you want company. You have a place here now." The words hit Olivia like a physical blow. This woman, who had known her for only a few hours, was offering her the belonging she had craved her entire life. The fact that it was based on a lie made it both precious and devastating. "Thank you," she managed, her voice slightly unsteady. "That means more to me than you know." As they drove home through the quiet streets, Olivia stared out the window at houses lit with Christmas displays, processing the evening's events. Matteo's family had welcomed her without reservation, treating her like someone precious and important. For a few hours, she had felt like she belonged somewhere. "That went well," Matteo said finally, his voice careful. "Your family is wonderful," Olivia replied honestly. "They made me feel so welcome." "They like you," he said. "Really like you. My mother is already planning your next visit." The observation hung between them, highlighting the complexity of their situation. His family's genuine affection for her made their arrangement feel less like business and more like an elaborate deception that could hurt people she was already beginning to care about. "Matteo," she started, then stopped, unsure how to voice her growing concerns about the ethics of their fake relationship. "I know," he said quietly, seeming to understand her unspoken thoughts. "This is more complicated than either of us expected." As they pulled up to her building, Olivia turned to look at him directly. "When your mother hugged me, when your father asked about my traditions, when Lucia said we looked sweet together, it felt real. All of it felt real." "Because it was real," Matteo said after a moment, his voice low and honest. "Their feelings were real, even if our reasons for being there were not entirely honest." The admission settled between them like a confession, acknowledgement that their performance had revealed something neither of them had expected to find. As Olivia climbed out of his car and walked toward her building, she could not shake the feeling that everything had changed tonight, and there would be no going back to their careful professional distance. Christmas morning dawned bright and cold, sunlight streaming through the tall windows of the Sant'Angelo family room as everyone gathered around the massive tree. Olivia had returned early with Matteo, wearing a soft cashmere sweater and dark jeans that Isabella had insisted she take home the night before, along with a bag of leftover tiramisu and strict instructions to return for breakfast. The scene before her looked like something from a magazine spread about perfect family holidays. Presents spilled out from under the tree in carefully wrapped abundance. Coffee steamed from elegant cups arranged on side tables, and the whole family moved with the comfortable choreography of people who had shared this tradition for decades. Olivia perched on the edge of the sofa next to Matteo, acutely aware that she was intruding on something precious and private. Despite Isabella's warm welcome and everyone's genuine friendliness, she felt like an imposter witnessing moments meant for family only. Before you ask, yes, we have a present for you, Lucia announced with a grin, retrieving a beautifully wrapped box from under the tree. We always buy extras just in case Matteo finally brings someone home. Olivia's eyes widened in surprise. You did not have to do that. I did not bring anything for anyone. Nonsense, Vincent said firmly. Your presence is present enough. Besides, Isabella has been shopping for Matteo's hypothetical girlfriend for years. She has a whole collection. The admission made everyone laugh, including Matteo, who shook his head in fond exasperation. Ma, you did not tell me about your imaginary girlfriend gift collection. A mother prepares for all possibilities, Isabella replied serenely, settling into her favorite armchair with her coffee. I knew someday you would find someone wonderful and bring her home. I wanted to be ready. The statement hung in the air with quiet significance. These people had been hoping for this moment, planning for the day when Matteo would find love. The fact that it was all pretend made Olivia feel simultaneously touched and guilty. When Olivia opened her gift, she found a delicate silk scarf in shades of blue and silver, impossibly soft and clearly expensive. Inside the box was a note in Isabella's careful handwriting, for new family. Welcome home. The words made her throat tighten unexpectedly. She looked up to find the entire family watching her reaction with warm anticipation, clearly pleased with their choice. It is beautiful, she managed, her voice slightly unsteady. Thank you all so much. The blue will be perfect with your coloring, Francesca observed approvingly. Ma has excellent taste in gifts. As the morning progressed through the gift exchange, Olivia found herself drawn deeper into the family's natural rhythm. They teased each other mercilessly but lovingly, shared inside jokes that spanned decades, and included her in every conversation with a kind of unconscious acceptance that spoke of people who genuinely enjoyed adding new members to their circle. When all the presents had been opened and the wrapping paper cleared away, Marco rubbed his hands together with obvious mischief. Time for the Christmas games, he announced. Oh no, Matteo said immediately. Not this year. Oh yes, definitely this year, Lucia countered with matching glee. Especially this year, since we finally have a complete couple to torture properly. Olivia looked between the siblings with growing alarm. What kind of games exactly? The kind that reveal whether couples really know each other or are just pretending, Marco explained with an evil grin. Family tradition. No one escapes. Before either Matteo or Olivia could protest further, they found themselves positioned on opposite sides of the room with small whiteboards and markers. The rules, as explained by an increasingly gleeful Francesca, were simple. Each person would be asked questions about their partner, and their answers would be compared for accuracy. First question, Isabella announced, clearly enjoying herself immensely. What is your partner's biggest fear? Olivia stared at her whiteboard, panic rising in her chest. She barely knew Matteo outside their professional relationship. How was she supposed to know his deepest fears? She glanced across the room at him, noting the way his jaw had tightened slightly and his shoulders had squared in preparation for battle. Almost without conscious thought, she wrote, disappointing the people he cares about, on her board. It was a guess based on 2 years of watching him work with relentless perfectionism and the way his voice softened whenever he talked about his family. When they revealed their answers simultaneously, Matteo's board read, being completely alone, while Olivia's showed her guess about disappointment. The family studied both answers thoughtfully. Interesting, Vincent observed. Both answers suggest someone who values connection and responsibility. I think you both understand each other better than you realize. Next question, Lucia announced before either of them could process that observation fully. What is your partner's favorite way to relax after a stressful day? This time Olivia wrote, cooking something complicated while listening to jazz, without hesitation. She had noticed that on particularly difficult days at the office, Matteo would sometimes mention trying new recipes, and she had glimpsed jazz albums in his car. Matteo's board read, reading mysteries with a glass of wine and chocolate she pretends is dinner. The accuracy of his answer made Olivia's breath catch. How did he know about her mystery novel addiction or her terrible habit of eating chocolate for dinner when she was stressed? She had never mentioned either preference at work. Very good, Marco said approvingly. You have been paying attention to each other. Next question. What would be your partner's perfect date? Olivia hesitated for a moment before writing, somewhere quiet where we could actually talk. Maybe a small restaurant or cooking together at home. It was what she would want, but also what she suspected Matteo would prefer based on his personality. When they compared answers, Matteo's board read, something personal and low-key. She would want to feel special, but not like she was on display. The thoughtfulness of his response made her heart skip. He had clearly considered what would make her comfortable rather than what might impress her, and his understanding of her personality was remarkably accurate. The game continued with questions about favorite foods, dream vacations, biggest pet peeves, and childhood memories. With each round, Olivia became more amazed at how well Matteo seemed to know her despite their supposedly professional relationship. He knew she preferred tea to coffee in the afternoon, that she was self-conscious about her laugh, that she had always wanted to see Italy, but had never had the chance. More surprisingly, she found herself answering questions about him with increasing confidence. She knew he was protective of people he cared about, that he worked late to avoid an empty apartment, that he secretly fed the stray cat that hung around their office building. When the official game ended, the family erupted in impressed commentary about their compatibility and obvious connection. But Olivia barely heard the praise, too busy processing the unsettling realization that she and Matteo knew each other far better than either had acknowledged. That was remarkable, Isabella said warmly, settling beside Olivia while the others debated the next activity. You two understand each other very well for such a new relationship. We spend a lot of time together, Olivia replied carefully. Isabella studied her with knowing eyes. Time alone does not create understanding, Cara. That comes from paying attention because you care. And it is clear that you both care very much. Before Olivia could respond to that observation, Marco announced the next game, a dance contest that required couples to move together in sync. Olivia found herself in Matteo's arms for the first time, acutely aware of his height and the solid warmth of his chest against her cheek as they swayed to slow Christmas music. This is new, he murmured against her hair, his voice low enough that only she could hear. The dancing or the touching? She asked, trying to ignore the way her pulse had accelerated. All of it, he admitted. The way you knew I cook when I am stressed. The way I apparently know you read mysteries and eat chocolate for dinner. When did we learn all that about each other? Olivia considered the question as they moved together, noting how perfectly she fit against him and how natural his hands felt at her waist. I think we have been paying attention without realizing it. 2 years of working together, of seeing each other every day. But why were we paying attention, he asked. People work together all the time without noticing personal details. The question hung between them as the song ended and his family applauded their performance. Why had she noticed that he worked late to avoid loneliness? Why had he observed her afternoon tea preference and her self-consciousness about her laugh? Later, when the family had settled into post-lunch contentment and Olivia found herself alone in the kitchen with Isabella, the older woman addressed what everyone else seemed to understand instinctively. He has been different since he met you, Isabella said quietly while arranging leftovers in the refrigerator. More relaxed, more present when he is here. Before, he always seemed like he was thinking about work or problems. Now he seems happy. We have only been dating for 3 months, Olivia protested weakly. Isabella smiled knowingly. Sometimes the heart recognizes what it needs immediately, even when the mind takes longer to catch up. I knew Vincent was the one for me within a week of meeting him. 42 years later, I still feel the same way. The confession made Olivia's chest tighten with unexpected emotion. What if it does not work out? She asked. What if we are not as compatible as we seem? Then you figure it out together, Isabella said simply. But Caramia, I have watched my son with many women over the years. I have never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. And I have never seen him so calm and content. When Matteo found her a few minutes later, Olivia was staring out the kitchen window at the snow-covered garden, processing Isabella's words and her own growing confusion about their situation. Everything all right? He asked, moving to stand beside her. Your mother thinks we are perfect together, Olivia said without looking at him. My mother is a hopeless romantic who thinks everyone should be as happy as she and my father, he replied, but his tone lacked conviction. Is that what we are doing? Olivia asked, finally turning to face him. Pretending to be happy together? Mateo studied her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. I do not think we are pretending anymore, he said quietly. I think that is what scares me. The admission hung between them in the quiet kitchen, heavy with possibility and complication. Outside, snow began to fall more heavily, transforming the garden into something magical and otherworldly. Inside, two people who had started the weekend as colleagues were discovering that some connections could not be faked, and once acknowledged, could not be ignored. By late evening, the house had settled into the quiet rhythm that comes after a day of celebration and joy. The afternoon had passed in a comfortable blur of family conversation, card games, and the kind of casual intimacy that develops when people who care about each other spend unstructured time together. Olivia found herself relaxing completely for the first time in months, watching Mateo interact with his siblings with an ease she had never seen in their professional setting. As darkness fell outside the tall windows, Isabella began gathering coats and scarves with the purposeful efficiency of someone preparing for an important tradition. Time for midnight mass, she announced, though it was still early evening. We always go to the 9 o'clock service on Christmas Eve. Family tradition for 40 years. Olivia felt a moment of panic. She had not been to church since childhood, and even then it had been sporadic and uncomfortable. What if she did not know when to stand or sit? What if she said the wrong thing or behaved inappropriately? Mateo seemed to sense her nervousness, moving to her side with the kind of casual protectiveness that was becoming second nature. You do not have to participate in anything that makes you uncomfortable, he said quietly. Just being there is enough. The church was a small stone building that looked like it had stood on the same corner for centuries, its stained glass windows glowing warmly against the winter darkness. Snow had begun falling again, creating the kind of Christmas card perfection that made everything feel magical and significant. Inside, the sanctuary was decorated simply but beautifully, with white flowers and soft candlelight that created an atmosphere of peace and reflection. The Santangelo family filled an entire pew, with Olivia positioned between Mateo and Francesca, surrounded by their warmth and belonging. The service itself was lovely, full of familiar Christmas hymns and readings that spoke of hope and new beginnings. But what struck Olivia most was the way Mateo's hand found hers during the quiet moments, his fingers intertwining with hers as naturally as breathing. It was not performance for his family's benefit, since no one could see their joined hands in the dim lighting. It was simply connection, comfort, and something that felt increasingly like affection. During a particularly beautiful musical piece, Olivia found herself studying Mateo's profile in the candlelight. He looked peaceful here, his usual intensity softened by the sacred setting and the presence of his family. When he caught her watching him, his smile was gentle and private, meant only for her. The moment felt suspended in time, weighted with significance that had nothing to do with their supposed arrangement and everything to do with the growing understanding that something real was happening between them. In the quiet sanctity of the church, surrounded by his family's love and acceptance, Olivia could no longer pretend this was just business. After the service, they returned home to find that Isabella and her daughters had somehow managed to prepare yet another elaborate meal during their absence. The Christmas Eve feast was different from the previous night's dinner, more intimate and contemplative, with traditional Italian dishes that carried the weight of family history and cultural pride. This was the meal my grandmother made for us when I was growing up, Isabella explained as she served delicate pasta with a sauce that smelled like heaven. She brought these recipes from Sicily, and we have been making them every Christmas Eve for as long as I can remember. The food was incredible, each dish prepared with obvious love and expertise. But more than the meal itself, Olivia was moved by the stories that accompanied each course, the way food connected this family to their heritage and to each other. She had never experienced anything like it, this sense of continuity and belonging that stretched across generations. When Vincent stood to offer a toast with the wine that had been saved for this moment, his words carried the weight of tradition and sincere emotion. To family, he said, his glass raised toward everyone gathered around the table. To the people we love and the blessings we share. and to new additions who make our circle stronger and our hearts fuller. His eyes included Olivia deliberately in the blessing, and she felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. These people barely knew her, yet they were including her in their most sacred family traditions as if she had always belonged here. To love found and love shared, Isabella added, her own glass raised and her eyes moving meaningfully between Matteo and Olivia. To the way the heart knows what it needs, even when the mind is still catching up. The words hung in the air with obvious significance, and Olivia felt heat creep up her neck as she realized that Matteo's entire family believed they were witnessing the early stages of a great love story. The fact that they were right, despite starting from deception, made the moment both beautiful and terrifying. As the evening wound down and family members began making their departure plans, Matteo suggested a walk in the garden to enjoy the snowfall before they headed home. Olivia found herself bundled in one of Francesca's coats, walking beside him through the snow-covered landscape that surrounded his childhood home. The garden was transformed by winter and darkness into something ethereal and magical. Snow outlined every branch and turned the familiar into something mysterious and beautiful. Their footsteps crunched softly in the fresh powder, and their breath created small clouds that dissipated quickly in the cold air. They walked in comfortable silence for several minutes, both seemingly content to enjoy the peaceful moment and the beauty of their surroundings. When they reached a small stone bench positioned beneath an old oak tree, Matteo stopped and turned to face her directly. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice serious in the quiet darkness. "This arrangement we made, this fake relationship, it stopped being fake somewhere between yesterday and tonight." Olivia felt her heart begin to race. Though whether from excitement or terror, she could not determine. "What do you mean?" "I mean that when you walked into that restaurant in the blue dress, something shifted for me," he said honestly. "When my mother hugged you and you looked like you might cry from happiness, when you knew I cook when I am stressed without me ever telling you, when you fit perfectly in my arms during that ridiculous dance contest, I realized this was not performance anymore." The words hung between them in the snow-filled air, honest and vulnerable in a way that made Olivia feel like crying. She had spent 2 years thinking of Matteo as untouchable, professionally perfect, someone whose personal life was none of her business. The idea that he had been noticing her, thinking about her, feeling something for her was almost impossible to process. "I never thought you saw me," she admitted quietly. "Not as anything more than efficient assistance. I never imagined you paid attention to things like my tea preference or my reading habits." "I have been paying attention to you for months," Matteo said, stepping closer so she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "The way you organize my chaos, the way you remember details about people I meet once, the way you make everything in my professional life run smoothly so I can focus on what matters. But also the way you bite your lip when you are concentrating, the way you smile at the stray cat by our building, the way you work late because you do not want to go home to an empty apartment." Each observation hit her like a small revelation. He had been watching her, noticing her, seeing her in ways she had not thought possible given their professional boundaries. "Why did you never say anything?" she asked. "Because you work for me," he said simply. "Because the power dynamic made any personal approach inappropriate. Because I convinced myself that what I was feeling was just proximity and familiarity rather than genuine attraction. And now? Now I think I was lying to myself," he replied. "Now I think that asking you to pretend to be my girlfriend was my subconscious way of creating an excuse to have what I wanted but could not ask for directly." The admission was so honest, so vulnerable, that Olivia felt her own walls crumbling in response. Standing in the snow-covered garden, surrounded by the aftermath of the most wonderful family celebration she had ever experienced, she could no longer maintain the careful professional distance that had kept them apart for 2 years. "When your mother said I was welcome here anytime, when your father included me in his toast, when Lucia said we looked sweet together, it felt like coming home," she confessed. "I have never felt like I belonged anywhere, Matteo. My own family barely tolerates me, and I have spent my entire adult life feeling like I am on the outside looking in. But here, with your family, with you, I felt like I finally found my place." "You have," he said softly, reaching up to cup her face in his gloved hands. "You have found your place, Olivia. With me, with us, with this family who already loves you. The words broke something open in her chest, some wall she had built around her heart to protect herself from hoping for exactly this kind of acceptance and love. When he leaned down to kiss her, soft and tentative in the falling snow, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. The kiss was gentle and questioning at first, as if he was giving her time to change her mind or pull away. When she responded by stepping closer and sliding her arms around his neck, he deepened the contact with obvious relief and growing passion. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard in the cold air, Matteo rested his forehead against hers with a smile that was both tender and slightly overwhelmed. "So this is real now," he said, though it sounded more like a statement than a question. "This was always real," Olivia replied, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "We just needed an excuse to admit it." As they walked back toward the house, hand in hand through the falling snow, Olivia reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought them to this moment. What had started as a business arrangement had become something precious and genuine, something that felt blessed by Christmas magic and family approval. Tomorrow they would have to figure out what this meant for their professional relationship and their personal future. But tonight, walking through the snow with the man she was finally allowed to love, Olivia felt like she had received the Christmas miracle she had never dared to hope for, a place to belong and someone who saw her as worth keeping. Christmas morning dawned crisp and bright, sunlight streaming through the guest room windows where Olivia had spent the night after the family insisted it was too late and snowy for her to return home. She woke to the sound of laughter and conversation drifting up from the kitchen, the familiar warmth of a house filled with people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. When she made her way downstairs, she found the family already gathered around the breakfast table, with Isabella orchestrating the morning meal with the same loving efficiency she applied to every aspect of family life. Matteo looked up from his coffee when she appeared, his smile soft and private in a way that made her remember every detail of their conversation in the snow-covered garden. "Buongiorno, Bella," Isabella called warmly, gesturing for Olivia to take the seat beside Matteo that had clearly been saved for her. "Perfect timing. We were just discussing plans for today." As Olivia settled into her chair, accepting the perfectly prepared coffee that Matteo slid toward her without being asked, she became aware that the entire family was watching them with barely contained excitement. There was an expectant energy in the room that suggested they were waiting for something significant to happen. "We have something for you," Francesca announced, producing an elegantly wrapped box that was clearly different from the general family gifts that had been distributed the day before. "This is from Matteo specifically," Lucia added with obvious glee. "He asked us to wrap it specially." Olivia looked at Matteo in surprise. "You got me another gift? You already did too much with the clothing and jewelry for last night." "This is different," he said quietly, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "This is personal." When she opened the box, Olivia found herself staring at a delicate gold bracelet with a small charm in the shape of an airplane. Attached was a note written in Matteo's careful handwriting. "For someone who dreams of seeing Italy, but has never had the chance. Maybe we can fix that together." The gift hit her with unexpected force. Months ago, during a casual conversation about weekend plans, she had mentioned her desire to visit Italy someday, to see the places her favorite mystery novels were set. She had not thought he was paying attention to what seemed like idle chatter. Yet here was proof that he had been listening carefully to dreams she barely admitted to herself. "Matteo," she whispered, her voice unsteady as she studied the beautiful bracelet. "This is too much." "Nothing is too much for someone important to you," Isabella said meaningfully, her eyes moving between them with obvious satisfaction. "The question is, what are your plans for making this Italy trip happen?" The innocent question carried loaded significance, and Olivia felt the attention of the entire family focus on them with laser intensity. They were clearly expecting an answer about future plans, about the progression of a relationship they believed was genuine and serious. "We have not really discussed travel plans yet," Olivia said carefully, aware that she and Matteo had not yet had a conversation about what their confession in the garden meant for their actual future. "Oh, but you must," Vincent interjected warmly. "Young couples should travel together. It is how you really get to know each other, how you discover if you are truly compatible for the long term." The observation hung in the air with obvious implication, and Olivia felt heat creep up her neck as she realized the family was essentially asking about the seriousness of their relationship and their intentions toward each other. Speaking of plans, Marco added with a grin that suggested mischief, "When do we get to start planning the wedding? Because Maya's already begun looking at venues, just in case." Isabella swatted at her youngest son playfully, but her expression suggested Marco was not entirely wrong about her premature wedding planning. These people were clearly hoping for a love story with a happily ever after conclusion, and they were not subtle about their expectations. "We are taking things one step at a time," Matteo said diplomatically, though his hand found Olivia's under the table and squeezed gently. "But I can promise you that Olivia is not going anywhere." The declaration sent warmth flooding through her chest, though she noted that he had managed to be reassuring without making specific commitments about their future. His family seemed satisfied with the response, returning to their breakfast with obvious contentment about the direction of his love life. Later, when the breakfast dishes had been cleared and the family had settled into the relaxed rhythm of Christmas morning, Matteo suggested a walk to give them space for a private conversation. They bundled into coats and scarves again, stepping out into the winter wonderland that yesterday's snowfall had created. "We need to talk about what happens next," Matteo said once they were alone, his breath creating small clouds in the cold air. "My family clearly expects this relationship to continue, and after last night, I think we both want it to continue. But we need to figure out how that works practically." Olivia nodded, grateful that he was addressing the complications directly. "The workplace dynamic," she said. "We cannot just pretend that did not happen, that there are not ethical issues to consider." "I have been thinking about that," he replied. "What if we handled it the way any professional couple would? HR documentation, clear boundaries at work, complete transparency about our relationship status." The suggestion was practical and thoughtful, showing that he had been considering the real-world implications of their situation. It also suggested that he was serious enough about their relationship to navigate the complexities rather than simply ending their professional association. "And your family's expectations?" she asked. "They clearly think we are heading towards something permanent and serious." Matteo stopped walking, turning to face her directly with the kind of intense focus that had always characterized his approach to important matters. "What if they are right? What if we are heading towards something permanent and serious?" The question hung between them in the crisp air, weighted with possibility and significance. "Are you asking me what I think about that possibility, or are you telling me what you want?" "I am telling you that I love you," he said simply, the words carrying absolute certainty and conviction. "I am telling you that what started as a fake arrangement has become the most real thing in my life. I am telling you that I want you to keep my mother's bracelet and use it, that I want to take you to Italy and show you all the places you have dreamed of seeing. I am telling you that I want to figure out how to build a life together that honors both our professional relationship and our personal feelings." The declaration was so comprehensive, so honest and vulnerable, that Olivia felt tears threaten behind her eyes. Standing in the snow with this man who had somehow become everything she had not dared to hope for, she realized that her answer had been building for months without her conscious awareness. "I love you too," she said, her voice strong despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "I love your dedication and your kindness and the way you notice things about people that matter. I love your family and the way they welcome me like I belonged here. I love that you listened when I mentioned wanting to see Italy and remembered it months later. I love that you are brave enough to figure out how to make this work despite the complications." When he kissed her this time, it was not tentative or questioning, but celebratory and sure. The kiss of someone who had found what he was looking for and had no intention of letting it go. When they broke apart, both smiling and slightly breathless, Olivia felt like the Christmas magic that had been building since the moment she agreed to this arrangement had finally reached its intended conclusion. They walked back toward the house hand in hand, and as they approached the front door, Olivia noticed the mistletoe hanging in the doorway that she had somehow missed during their previous comings and goings. When Matteo saw her looking up at it, he grinned with obvious delight. "Well," he said, positioning them both directly beneath the traditional Christmas decoration, "I suppose we should honor the tradition properly." This kiss was soft and sweet, flavored with laughter and joy rather than passion and urgency. When it ended, They found the entire Santangelo family watching from the living room window with expressions of uncontainable happiness and satisfaction. Inside, the family erupted in celebration when Matteo officially announced that their relationship was real and permanent, that they were genuinely together and planning a future that would include regular family dinners and holiday traditions. Isabella cried happy tears while hugging them both repeatedly. Vincent opened champagne despite the early hour, and the siblings began an elaborate discussion of wedding planning that made both Matteo and Olivia laugh with amused resignation. 3 weeks later, on New Year's Eve, they stood together on the roof of Matteo's Manhattan penthouse, watching fireworks explode over the city skyline. Olivia wore the gold bracelet with its airplane charm, and in her purse were 2 tickets to Rome for a February vacation that would fulfill her long-held dream of seeing Italy. The transition back to work had been surprisingly smooth, with HR documentation filed and clear boundaries established that allowed them to maintain their professional efficiency while acknowledging their personal relationship. Their colleagues had been supportive rather than shocked, with several people mentioning that they had always sensed an underlying connection between them. So, Matteo said as midnight approached and the city prepared for the traditional countdown, "Any regrets about agreeing to be my fake girlfriend?" Olivia considered the question, thinking about everything that had changed since that December evening when she had been alone in the office with no holiday plans and no hope of belonging anywhere. Now she had a man who loved her, a family who had welcomed her completely, and a future that felt full of possibility rather than resignation. "Just one," she said, smiling up at him as the countdown began around them. "Which is, that we waited so long to admit what we both knew was true," she replied as the clock struck midnight, and the new year began with a kiss that tasted like champion and felt like coming home. Comment below if you believe in Christmas miracles and the magic of unexpected love, because sometimes the most beautiful relationships begin when we stop pretending and start being honest about what our hearts already know. Sometimes fake love becomes the most real thing you will ever find, and sometimes the best gifts come wrapped in the most unlikely packages. Standing in his arms as the fireworks painted the sky with color and light, Olivia reflected on the perfect irony that pretending to be in love had taught them both what real love actually felt like. What had begun as a business arrangement had become a Christmas miracle, proving that the heart knows what it needs even when the mind is still catching up, and that sometimes the most authentic connections begin with the bravest lies.